Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. 5 questions that we want to see answered from this Michigan program heading into spring practice. And this has been a really exciting offseason for a lot of Michigan fans, obviously with the head coaching change, but more importantly, the position battles that we're going to see heading into spring practice. And a lot of question marks on the depth chart. But those questions aren't necessarily, they don't have answers, right? There are a lot of good players on this Michigan roster. I think more of the question is, out of all these good players, who are going to be earning the starting reps for this Michigan team heading into that 2024 year? A little bit of a different flavor of offseason, right? Last year at this time, we could kind of clearly project what Michigan's starting units were going to be at this time last year. I think you head into this spring practice and this offseason, a lot more question marks, a lot more position battles that we're going to be seeing taking place. Want to talk about a few of those position battles that we have taken place in spring practice. Really excited to get into it. Before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys. And as always, a massive shout out to the Michigan fans. Many of you guys know I'm a massive Michigan fan. There is not a program I love talking more about than the Michigan Wolverines, and the amount of support you guys have shown the boys the last couple of weeks with the coaching moves, with the player and personnel moves. Cannot thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And more importantly, would love to hear from you guys in the comment section as well. Not only some answers to the questions that I'm posing, but would love to hear some of your spring practice questions as well. We'll probably talk a lot about some of these questions as spring practice kicks off. And without further ado, let's get into this one. And I want to start with, the most obvious question that we have as Michigan fans is the quarterback battle. And it's a really hard quarterback position battle to project. I think my overarching take on the quarterback battle is you have a lot of different kind of flavors of quarterbacks heading into this spring camp. Now, you look at guys like Alex Orji and Jaden Denigal. They're really high upside guys that if they put it together, the ceiling for this Michigan offense is going to be really exciting. Then you have guys like Jack Tuttle. You could sprinkle in Davis Warren, maybe even true freshman Jaden Davis. And I think guys like Jack Tuttle, Davis Warren are much more of that, hey, we know what we have there. They have really high floors. We know we can win a lot of football games with a guy like Jack Tuttle starting at quarterback in 2024. And I think the overall conversation is you're going to see a very heated competition heading into spring practice. And I think at the end of spring practice and that evaluation period and the spring game, I think Kurt Campbell, Sherrone Moore get together and say, hey, what do we think about this Michigan quarterback room? Do we think there is a guy or a couple of guys that we can win a lot of football games with? And if that answer is no, which it certainly could be, right? If Alex Orji, Jaden Denigal maybe don't take the steps that we expect, this immediately becomes the most attractive destination for a transfer portal quarterback. Now, do I think that's the avenue that this goes down? No, probably not, because you got a lot of potential answers in this quarterback room. But at the end of the day, I think that is a very, very real possible outcome in terms of, hey, we get together and say, we think we can make this quarterback room better. Michigan is going to be the most attractive destination for a transfer portal quarterback post-spring practice. You look at a very good offensive line, a very good run game, Kurt Campbell calling the plays. Those are a lot of boxes checked for potential quarterbacks looking to find a new home in 2024. So we'll see how that shakes out heading into spring practice. The next question mark I have that I'm kind of interested to see how it shakes out is the running back depth chart. Now, you have Donovan Edwards coming back, but many of the Michigan fans who've been rocking with the boys for the last couple of weeks know I'm a massive Khalil Mullings fan. And you look at Khalil Mullings and kind of the trajectory that he's on. This is a guy that, 2 years ago was playing linebacker for Michigan. Last year was really his first full time playing that running back position. This was arguably our best pure ball carry that we saw last year. Averaged 6.2 yards per carry, averaged over 4 yards after contact per carry. You look at how Michigan wants to run the football. That is how Khalil Mullings runs it, right? Downhill, absorbing contact. You talk about Michigan wearing down teams in the third and fourth quarter, kind of having those figurative body blows. Khalil Mullings is that kind of running back. Now, do I think Khalil Mullings leads this team in carries? I certainly think that's a possibility. And then how do you use Donovan Edwards? If you decide to give Khalil Mullings that workload, you saw Kurt Campbell. use Donovan Edwards in a lot of different ways. You saw him as a slot wide receiver. I think there's certainly a possibility you see a 2 running back backfield, especially if you have Alex Orji as your starting quarterback. Even if Kalel Mullings gets a lot of work, I would fully expect guys like Donovan Edwards to be used in this offense in creative ways. And quite frankly, that might be the best outcome for this Michigan running back room, where Kalel Mullings is your guy that's going between the tackles, and you have Donovan Edwards as a guy that you can get out to the perimeter. You can use as a pass catcher out of the backfield. The game of college football is really all about using your talent in the best ways possible. And I think Donovan Edwards, Kalel Mullings offer some different traits, but certainly both guys that Michigan is going to use often in that 2024 year. My eyes are on Kalel Mullings potentially being that running back one heading into the 2024 season. And you sprinkle in guys like Benjamin Hall, who was a spring game last year kind of shiner. You have Cole Cabana, you have Jordan Marshall coming in. It's a loaded running back room. Kind of just interested in seeing how the workload gets distributed and what that depth chart shakes out to be. Next question we have is, the offensive line. And I think there's probably a couple guys that are going to be starting. I think Myles Hinton probably has that right tackle spot locked down. And Myles Hinton's a guy that, going back and watching some film, really exciting player. You talk about road grader in the run game, moving guys off the line of scrimmage. That is Myles Hinton. Now he's got to clean up that pass protection a little bit. If he does, you're looking at a very high upside tackle. A couple other guys that I think you're penciling in to be starters: Giovanni El-Hadi, Greg Crippen at center. I would throw in Raheem Anderson as a guy that's competing for one of those interior offensive line spots. And then I'm looking at a guy like Andrew Gentry, potentially at left tackle. This was a guy that was a very coveted recruit, goes on the 2-year mission, getting his feet back wet at the college football level, a guy that has all the traits to be elite. At the end of the day, you have probably 10 plus guys that would be starting on a lot of other Power 5 programs that are going to be competing for starting spots on this offensive line. It's not a concern of mine. I'm just interested as a fan to see how that offensive line depth chart shakes out. The fourth question that I have, and this is, I think, outside of the quarterback question, probably the next most interesting conversation that you can have with this Michigan team in terms of how the depth chart shakes out, is that secondary room. I kind of think of it as, and again, it's that same conversation of, you got so many good players. The question is, do we have enough good players? That's not the question. The question is, all right, who is going to be earning those reps, and how are we going to be putting these pieces together in that puzzle? That was a sentence in there. That was an analogy that didn't go so well for me. Now, looking at the secondary, the way I look at it is, you got 3 starting spots probably locked up. Well, definitely locked up, right? Will Johnson is a starting cornerback. Rod Moore is a starting safety. Makari Page is a starting safety. Now, the question is, all right, do you kick Rod Moore down to that nickel role that Mikey Sandstro played last year? I think you certainly could, but I like Rod Moore in the back end at that safety spot just because of the instincts that he has. There's not a coincidence that Rod Moore is in the right place at the right time every single time. It's because you can't teach the instincts that Rod Moore has. And that's why I like him at that safety spot. So for me, you have 3 guys that are kind of locked into being starters in this Michigan secondary. Now you got 2 spots to fill. You got a boundary cornerback spot, and you got that nickel spot. Some of the guys that I'm keeping an eye on, first at that boundary cornerback spot, Jair Hill is a guy that I think has tremendous upside in terms of what he can be. I thought you saw some really good things out of him as a true freshman. If you were asking me to pencil in a starting cornerback opposite Will Johnson, I would lean Jair Hill, but he's going to have some competition in the back end, right? DJ Waller is a guy that is massive, right? 6'3", 205 pounds. I saw a picture of him getting a workout in the other day. He looks like he could be a linebacker, but moves extremely well. I think the upside with a guy like DJ Waller is extremely exciting. I think he's going to battle Jair Hill for that boundary cornerback spot. Then you look at the nickel role, and right now, if you were to ask me to pencil one in, I think it would be Jaden McBurrows, who you saw play a little bit of that boundary cornerback last year. I think he is kind of that perfect place. He's kind of that perfect guy to play that nickel role. You look at what made Mikey Sandstro so good at that nickel role last year. One, it was the ability to have that quick twitch, right? A little bit smaller, but very, very quick, being able to mirror receivers, and then being physical in the run game. I think Jaden McBurrows has that body type, has those skill sets. I think Jaden McBurrows is probably your lead candidate to play that nickel role. Some other guys I'm taking a look at, and many of the Michigan fans who've listened for a long time here, is Zeke Berry. Zeke Berry is a guy that you saw him kind of play that nickel role out of the high school level, has come in, hasn't gotten a ton of playing time because he's been behind guys like Makari Page, Rod Moore, Keon Sabb. The way I look at Zeke Berry is I'm not necessarily sure where he fits, whether he's a safety, whether he's a nickel. I want to see him on the field because going back and watching that high school film, he is a special athlete that brings a special set of tools to this defense. You talk about getting speed on the field, but also being able to stop the run, kind of the goal of modern day defenses where you're trying to match offenses like Oregon and Ohio State with the multiple wide receiver sets, but also not giving up in the run support. Zeke Berry's kind of that chess piece in my mind. So I'm excited to see where Zeke Berry slots in. And again, at the end of the day, you got 5, 6, 7 guys in that defensive back room that are all very good players, but more importantly, extremely versatile. And I think that's going to allow guys like Wink Martindale to decide, all right, how do we get our best 5 defensive backs on the field? And more importantly, how do we use those 5 defensive backs most efficiently that fits their skill set and what they bring to the table? Now, the last question that I have is going back to the offensive side of the football. What does the offensive scheme look like for Michigan? I think this depends on a couple different things. One, obviously, your starting quarterback, right? If you go with a guy like Alex Orji, you're probably looking at a run-heavy scheme where you're using Alex Orji's legs even more than we did with J.J. McCarthy last year. But I think another question is, because that kind of changes if you're going with a guy like Jack Tuttle. More importantly, my question is, how much does Sherrone Moore have control of what this offense looks like? Does he fully relinquish play calling duties to Kurt Campbell? Because if he does, I do think we talked about what does Kurt Campbell bring to this offense? A little bit more of a robust downfield passing attack, right? You go back to the game where Sherrone Moore and Jim Harbaugh were suspended against East Carolina, where Kurt Campbell was calling the plays. You saw a little bit more aggression down the field, relying on the quarterback to make some big time throws. I think another question outside of who's starting at quarterback is how much does Sherrone Moore continue to have his fingerprints on the offense? If you've seen a lot of 12 personnel, a lot of the run game, you know Sherrone Moore is probably still not running this offense, but having a heavy hand in what this offense looks like. But if you do see a little bit more aggression down the field with quarterbacks pushing the ball down the field, I think that probably leans to Kurt Campbell having more control of this offense. I'm really excited to see the scheme that we decide to play with. Again, depends on one, who's our starting quarterback. More importantly, how much is Kurt Campbell running this offense and how much of it is a partnership between Kurt Campbell and Sherrone Moore? Those are just the 5 questions that I have right now. We have plenty of other questions, wide receivers that step up, the edge depth at that edge rusher position. We got a lot of things to talk about as spring practice kicks off. We'll continue to monitor all these situations. Again, can't thank the Michigan fans enough for all the support. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.